Hello everybody, and welcome to Ancient Architects. Mainstream historians have long propagated the myth that the large sarsen stones of Stonehenge were dragged for 20 miles from the Marlborough Downs to Salisbury Plain, where they were erected to create a temple that marked important astronomical observations and also to honour the dead. Furthermore, some experts state that people brought the bluestones of Stonehenge all the way from Wales, and the structure is therefore of extreme importance if such an effort was exerted to move such large stones. In truth, there is no evidence to back up the claims that any of the stones were brought from Wales or the Marlborough Downs. They are theories based on geological knowledge of abundances of rock types, but I have always believed that this is in fact incorrect. In April 2018, a headline broke in just about all of the mainstream news outlets that Stonehenge rocks were in place millions of years before humans. And while some have misinterpreted this rather click-baity headline to mean that Stonehenge is a far more ancient monument, the truth simply confirms my belief that at least some, if not all of the stones of Stonehenge were locally sourced. So what is the story? Well, archaeologist Mike Pitts has published a new paper in the British Archaeology Journal that argues that two of the largest sarsen stones of Stonehenge have always been present in the vicinity of the monument. Back in the 1970s, Mike Pitts was excavating beside the Heelstone, the largest sarsen and located 75 feet from the centre of the stone circle. This stone weighs around 60 tons, was not shaped or dressed like the other sarsens, but it was an important astronomical marker, and it marked the sunrise and fall at midsummer and midwinter when observing this astronomical event from the stone circle. During his excavation, Pitts found a 6-metre wide hole, which was too big to have been a socket for a standing stone, but big enough to have once contained the huge boulder. The find suggests that the Heelstone was lifted out of this hole and then stood upright, and therefore it wasn't brought onto Salisbury Plain from the Marlborough Downs or anywhere else. It was native to the site. Pitts goes on to suggest that the rock's alignment with the solstice sun was merely a coincidence, and that maybe Stonehenge was built inside the centre of the circular henge earthwork which existed for hundreds of years before the stone circle was erected because of the coincidental observance of the solstice sun with the Heelstone. Pitts told The Times, "The assumption used to be that all of the sarsens at Stonehenge had come from the Marlborough Downs, more than 20 miles away. The idea has since been growing that some may be local, and that the Heelstone came out of that big pit." He continues, "If you are going to move something that large, you would dress it before you move it, to get rid of some of the bulk. That suggests it has not been moved very far. It makes sense that the Heelstone has always been more or less where it is now, half buried." There is also another hole or pit in the ground, found between two stones in the centre of the inner horseshoe of Sarsens, that poses the theory of a second stone, possibly stone 16, that may have originated from this site. When you are stood at this second hole, the midsummer sun rises over the position of the Heelstone's hole, and therefore the two ancient buried stones pinpointed in astronomical observation by mere coincidence. Sarsen is a layer of super hard sandstone that formed millions of years ago over the chalk that makes up the rolling hills of Wiltshire. During the Ice Age, the permafrost that covered the Salisbury Plain repeatedly thawed and froze, naturally shattering the layer of sarsen. There was also glaciation in the region, which is likely to have moved large sarsen boulders. In time, as ice retreated and the ground thawed, many sarsens may have been moved into streams and river channels due to the large volumes of floodwaters from melting ice, whilst others would just sink below the surface and become buried in the accumulating earth. Sarsen fragments would have been visible in some places on the land, and also in places such as streams and combes as the energy of the floodwaters waned. Some scholars are now saying that Stonehenge was built where it was during the Neolithic because people noted the natural observation of midsummer sunrise over the positions of the two sunken large natural rock fragments. Most experts will still no doubt propagate the myth that most of the stones were brought from the Marlborough Downs 20 miles away, but this discovery from Mike Pitts makes it just as likely that each and every sarsen stone of Stonehenge was locally sourced. I would hazard a guess that many of the stones were found poking through the earth, and even more were possibly found in the nearby combe or stream known as Stonehenge Bottom. We know that humans occupied the Stonehenge landscape since the Mesolithic, with occupied sites such as Blickmead, as well as the wooden post holes found in the Stonehenge car park, which are believed to be around 10,000 years old. We know that the first phase of building the Stonehenge monument itself wasn't the erection of the stone circle, but the circular bank and ditch, which is what a henge monument actually is. This predates the stone circle by hundreds of years, and I strongly believe that this was a monument with an agricultural purpose, which I will outline in a future video. I believe that all of the sarsen stones were found within the immediate landscape and were not dragged for 20 miles from the Marlborough Downs. There is simply no evidence for this. There is also no evidence that the bluestones inside the henge were transported from Wales to Wiltshire. Yes, the bluestones do come from geological outcrops in Wales, but due to the direction of transportation of ancient glaciers, these bluestones are just as likely to have been plucked from outcrops of rock in Wales and naturally deposited as glacial erratics within the vicinity of Stonehenge. These stones do not come from one specific location in Wales, as archaeologists lead us to believe, as geologists have analysed the bluestones and found that there are at least 20 different origins across Wales, which makes the idea of humans quarrying them and transporting them to Salisbury Plain highly unlikely. Mainstream historians and archaeologists try to sensationalise the ancient history of Britain with superhuman feats of dragging stones miles and miles to build a ceremonial monument. The truth is, the stones were likely all found locally, probably moved to the edges of field systems when the early Neolithic people began clearing land for cultivation. The huge circular bank and ditch were dug into the chalk in the late 4th millennium BC, most likely as a water containment structure, and hundreds of years later, a different culture moved into the landscape and moved all of these locally sourced stones into the centre of the henge, where they shaped them and constructed the stone circle we see today. The history of Stonehenge is not as colourful as many experts have led us to believe. As an architectural project, it is a fantastic structure, and it is no surprise it is Britain's most incredible ancient monument. But I don't believe the ancient Britons quarried stone and transported them for vast distances across land and sea. The stones were all locally sourced, and the recent discovery by Mike Pitts confirms what I've believed all along. Thank you very much for watching this news update from Ancient Architects. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, please like this video, and please leave a comment below. Thank you very much.